June 17, 2024. My apologies. We had a big yellow banner of deaths on the screen. So we had to redo all the security again. Hopefully that's resolved. I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm Dana Durnford. You can call in at 709-589-4406. Hope everybody's doing well. Yeah, I had no, and I got fiber optics, but I had no connection whatsoever. Had to shut down everything, close out, redo all the security. It's a nightmare. So don't forget to click around a little tiny bit if that's your cup of tea. It's my cup of tea anyway, for sure. Nuclear is nobody's cup of tea, so let's get her rockin' rollin'. Back in the woods again today. It's a picture from Saturday. My apologies. I got the videos imported from the day. I got the drone footage imported. We'll cover that at the end of the show. I'm not sure how long the show is going to be tonight. It's been a very long day. I just ate my breakfast 20 minutes ago or something. I never ate nothing all day. Just the weather is finally broken, right? So there's another worker had died at Fukushima. Now last night we covered it pretty extensive, and we're going to cover it again tonight. I got other thoughts to put in on it, obviously. And away we go. Let's get busy here. We're good to go. So we're going to be half an hour late, but then we couldn't get a connection. And so the poll tonight: should all nuclear power plants, also known as disease factories that are surrounded by farms, be closed to preserve life? And the majority of nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. All nuclear power plants are hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools, which are splitting atoms, and the fuel pools are full of decades of reactor cores that are still splitting atoms. This is why nuclear waste is dangerous, because they're still splitting atoms and there's no containment. And this has been hidden away for 80 years from everybody. Oh, only 7. Now, this story came out last week. We missed it. It didn't show up in the typical search engines. And I kind of showed a little clickety-click last night. But there's actually 42 of these clicks to get through. So 7% of the area in Fukushima residents return project deemed eligible for decontamination. In other words, 97% of the land is too radioactive. So, I don't know how, it's such a weird thing to say. So imagine you're in a town and 97% of the town is lethal, is deadly. Everything is airborne on top of that. How can 7% be considered habitable? This stuff is airborne. Not only that, the radiation, like gamma's pulsing energy 600 feet every second. These people, the industry is crazy. There's no other way to describe it outside of these people are crazies. We were on the trail today, no spider webs whatsoever. And as you know, there's a lot of rain for the last 3 weeks, right? And so the trails got a lot of water, a lot of potholes, and they're all full of water for the last 3 weeks. So it's really interesting because the weather is warmed up, but it's still a lot of rain. But the weather is warmed up, which means you would expect in the forest to find massive insects wherever that water is to. And by proxy, you would expect to see like dragonflies and other birds and that feeding on it, right? We're never seeing that today at all. I have some footage of that coming up. Less than 10% of the area is under consideration. Consideration? By who? For facilitating the return of residents in high radiation zones in Fukushima Prefecture have been deemed eligible for decontamination work under a new program according to the local lunatics and the national, which is Japan's self-government. And so this picture here is insane. And this is May the 23rd. This is less than a month ago, 2024. A sign indicates traffic regulations at a highly radioactive, difficult to return zone in Namie. So how can it be safe at the nuclear meltdown site when you can't go back to 93% of these communities? But it's perfectly safe at the nuclear meltdowns. And it's not. That's why the worker dropped dead. Only around 19 square kilometers of an area under consideration have been green lit. And the sluggish progress came to light almost a year after the specified return in habitational area systems. Specified return in habitational areas. First off, we're talking about a nuclear wasteland. It's 100% a nuclear wasteland. It's not a difficult to return zone. It's a zone you should never return to. And to call it a difficult to return zone, those people should be arrested and beaten up every day for the rest of their lives, legally, of course. It was introduced last June under the revised Act on Special Measures for Reconstruction and Revitalization of Fukushima. And I smell the International Atomic Energy Agency's dirty armpits all over this story, right? They're disgusting, aren't they? They definitely shouldn't exist. The initiative covers only neighborhoods around homes of residents who requested, who said, hey, I'm stupid as shit. So, like, say you got boxers, or you got mixed martial arts fighters, or whatever. You got referees, and their job is to protect you from yourself, from doing something stupid. Like you get hurt, their job is to stop the fight so you don't get even more hurt, right? But the government's job is supposed to be to stop you from going into a nuclear wasteland and getting hurt. But they consider their job is to trick you into going into the nuclear wasteland and getting hurt. They're the worst creatures conceivable. Of residents who requested in advance to return in some farmland, hopes to be used by their owners have been excluded. More than 90%, or roughly 270 square kilometers, of the areas include vast swaths of mountain, forest, and isolated private houses whose owners, thank goodness, have no intentions to return to the nuclear wasteland, leaving no prospect for the lifting of evacuation orders in the entire regions. Well, it's a nuclear wasteland, and so the minute it rains, it's going to recontaminate everything. The minute the wind blows, it's going to contaminate everything. None of the forests have been so-called decontaminated. You can't decontaminate a nuclear wasteland anyway. So every time the wind blows, you shower everything immediately again with high levels of radiation. Everything is airborne. And these people that are making these decisions are always unnamed. You'll never get their name. Right? It's somebody in the national government, right? These are crimes against humanity to send people back into a nuclear wasteland. It's unconscionable that anybody would conceive it or would try to promote it. It's unconscionable. And those people should be the police should immediately arrest these people that are trying to manipulate people and coerce people into going back into a nuclear wasteland. Not a difficult return zone. It's a nuclear wasteland. And it will be that way for at least another couple of million years. The difficult to return zone / nuclear wasteland, for anybody with common sense, straddles 7 municipalities and total 337 square kilometers. But it's okay at the nuclear meltdown, but you can't go back to these communities. But you can go to the nuclear meltdown. Do you got any idea how lunatic that assertion actually is? How insane and disproportionate that actual statement really is. Which housed more than 20,000 victims prior to the Fukushima meltdowns and massive perpetual radioactive fallout that is still ongoing today. Of these nuclear wastelands, the national degenerate government designated a total of 27.5 square kilometers in 6 municipalities, including densely populated neighborhoods and areas around railway stations, specified reconstruction revitalization base areas. Now, there's no nuclear scientists working there. There's no nuclear academics working there. There's no nuclear companies working there. The only people going to go back in there are the people that are stupid and gullible. That's it. Anybody else is going to say, no thank you. I'd rather live than go in and be radiated and have a miserable death. It's one of the worst ways to die is radiation illnesses. And conducted intensive decontamination work. You can't conduct intensive decontamination work. First off, 70% of it is forest. So every time the wind blows through the forest, it contaminates everything again because you can't decontaminate it. And what they're talking about for decontamination is scratching up 2 centimeters, not even an inch, 2.5 centimeters, scratching up the very surface layer. It's like if you were raking your garden, you would rake up 100 times more. They're scratching up the surface and calling that decontamination. And the people that are perpetrating it, you got to bring back, beheadings. You got to bring back burning them at the stakes while they're alive as an incentive to stop these lunatics, these degenerate monsters, these demonic, sadistic demons from harming people. There's no incentive not to be evil. There's no regulatory agencies. Yeah, they got regulatory agencies, but you can go look yourself. You will not see them regulate anything. They're the rubber stamp crew, right? Government 2022-2023 lifted evacuation orders for these areas, paving the way for victims, for the unsuspecting, for the complacent to resettle until they get sick and have to go into hospitals for major health interventions. Unlike the previous approach in which a certain range of areas were unconditionally included, only neighborhoods around the homes of the victims of the idiots who expressed their intentions to return. So they're certified idiots. If you can't work out after 13 years that going back there is stupid, you should be sterilized. You shouldn't be allowed to have children. To return in a preliminary survey are subject to decontamination under the law revised last year. Obviously, we're talking about the meddling of Rafael Grossi and International Atomic Energy Agency, UNSCLEAR, ERPA, the ICRP, and the rest of them, which are all United Nations. These are the worst degenerates humanity has created. And they make the most money too. And Japan, of course, is the third biggest donor to the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is another of the hundreds and hundreds of subsidies of the military industrial complex organization known as United Nations. / the New World Order, right? Which is what George Bush Sr. calls them multiple times. I can play the video if you want me to. You want me to? Okay, I'll play. Let's play the video. It's only a short video. George Bush Sr. just... I thought it was burnt out last night. You should see me right now. I'm burnt. I'm like a crispy, like a slice of bread that was left in the toaster way too long.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
So he calls it the New World Order, United Nations New World Order, multiple times. Full-scale decontamination work is commencing this fiscal year with a planned lifting of evacuation orders by the end of 2029 after radiation levels subside. They can't subside by 2029. It's radiation. It's not going to go away until it's 10 half-lives. And a lot of this we're looking, like there's a lot there you can't find with your Geiger counters, like the iodine 129. That's not going away. The humans will be long gone. That stuff will still be saturating the thyroid glands of every species left. Of the difficult to return zones, which are nuclear wastelands. And so using the connotations of difficult to return zone is they're plotting a crime to move people back into a nuclear wasteland. That's their admittance that they're planning to commit a crime against humanity. These are terrible crimes they're committing by framing that narrative that way, difficult to return. It's a nuclear wasteland. Roughly 290 square kilometers, this is 13 years later, are under consideration for the specified return habitation areas with the reconstruction base areas. Now, this was a concoction they drew up last year as they were manipulating you about the tanks at Fukushima, where they said, they moved the goalpost last year and said nothing got out of the reactors. Everything was in the tanks, and it was only tritium, so shut up. These reactors are completely annihilated. There is nothing left. There is nothing resembling a reactor. This is reactor 4, for instance, to your left. There's nothing there. Now, the people to the right are claiming that they're in the top of the building that doesn't exist. These here makes Chernobyl look like a friggin' paper towel. This is the Medusa, which is the reactor 3, which is a plutonium X oxide fuel, reclaim uranium, reclaim plutonium, which is another reason they're doing that because they can't store it. So they're putting it back in the chain reaction, which is literally the stupidest conceivable thing you could have done. And then if it didn't melt down but it did, but if it didn't melt down when you took the fuel out, its emissions, because it's still splitting atoms for millions of years, its emissions are toxic beyond the normal nightmare, the normal extermination machine. That's what a nuclear power plant is it's an extermination machine. They perpetually, all of them worldwide, are hemorrhaging radiation into the ecosystem on a rate that is just, it's terrifying. And almost all of them are surrounded by farms. They are 100% out to destroy you and every species. This is not a conjecture or an opinion. This is an absolute, unassailable, documented fact. We don't deal in conspiracy theories. We just deal in hard, brutal fact, period. There's no opinions. There's no conjectures. If there is, it's very rare, and I'm very clear when I say it, that this is strictly an opinion, and it's pretty rare for me to do that one. Of the difficult to return zone, nuclear wastelands, 290 square kilometers, which are still nuclear wastelands, are now under consideration. And then the wording is about absolving themselves of the crimes against humanity that they're trying to perpetrate. Most likely will. They're very successful at being monsters. Everything in the nuclear industry, entire legacy is predicated upon that facet. And the sites for the interim storage facilities for tainted, we're talking about 100,000 atoms per kilogram in these bags, with 1,000 kilograms per bag. These are minimum numbers, is 100,000 atoms per kilogram. And calling that tainted, which is meant to write, is to denigrate the facts and the truth through decontamination. This was not decontamination. This was the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, immigrants who don't speak the language, being told to go out and put the topsoil in 1-ton bags. There's no science applied here. There's no academics. There's no checks and balances. There was just this hateful, despicable, revolting, parasitic nuclear industry shadow in the background. You are in so much danger, and it's time to hold this industry accountable. You got no choice. There is no choice. You are going to have to do the hard. You are being called upon to save humanity and the 8 million species, or whatever is left of it. It's been annihilated post-Fukushima, right? We've done the research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska for 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean doing species counts. That's an extinction event. Not maybe, not almost, not close. It's an extinction event. The towns of Namie, Okuma, Futaba, and Tomoka, many of whose residents are eligible for the program, like Okuma and Futaba are both east or south and north joined onto the nuclear site itself. They host the nuclear site. And these are abandoned for 13 years. These and calling them nuclear wastelands still doesn't do it justice. These are just the reactors are still melting down. These are so toxic, so deadly to everything with replicating cells. And so are the other two, Namie and Tomoka, many of whose residents are eligible for the program but would never go back. Only the most complacent will go back. Only, literally, I hate to call them stupid, but you actually got to be stupid this day and age with so much access to information to go into a nuclear wasteland. You literally got to be. I hate using the word, but I don't know of another word that's appropriate. Only stupid. Of them, the national government has so far recognized a total of 19 square kilometers as eligible for decontamination of the 290 square kilometers, which is a mere 7% of the entire target area, which is 290 kilometers. 19 square kilometers. But yet it's supposed to be safe at the nuclear waste site, nuclear power plant meltdown site. But it's not safe to go into that 290 square kilometer communities. But it's safe at the nuclear meltdown, is it? And if you put on a paper suit, you're extra safe, apparently. And like anybody that believes that, I just can't. I can, but because there's no checks and balances out there, there's no like what I'm doing here. We're running an educational program. We're also doing research expeditions and research. We're also gathering up. And everything that I'm showing you can take this industry to court and win. And anybody who's watching a long time can take anybody in this nuclear industry to court and win. Because the nuclear industry is a perpetual lawyer. It can't tell the truth. It's got 80 years regurgitating the same laws. I'm going to be up and gone early tomorrow morning. I never even took the bike off the trailer. I never even took the trailer off the truck. Everything is still connected. I'm going to do is make some tea, get some ice water. Hopefully I was smart tomorrow morning, pack a lunch. But we got good weather. Now we got to go for it. I'll show you some videos coming up. It's not going to be a long show tonight, because I got to get up early and head out on research. We're looking for spider webs in particular. And summer is just starting right this week. And so we'll be on the ocean, we'll be in ponds, we'll be out on the trails. This is going to be a busy year. And it's going to be a pathetic year. We're not going to find much sign of life. We're 13 years down this rabbit hole. We're in real trouble. Of them, the national government has so far recognized a total of 19 square kilometers as eligible for decontamination. Like, it's insane. Every time I hear that kind of word, right, how do you decontaminate a nuclear wasteland? You can't, because you're talking about 290 square kilometer nuclear wasteland that they admit to. But you might as well admit that, you know, Tokyo is a nuclear wasteland with 29 million atoms per square meter of just after one single rainfall. These are numbers we never even conceived pre-Fukushima. There's, you know, Japan has produced more pollution, more radioactive fallout than all of the nuclear industry history. Because you've got multiple reactor cores that have detonated, melted down, or cannibalizing everything, atomizing and aerosoling, ionizing and radiating and releasing it constantly into the environment. You got fuel particulates everywhere. Fuel pellets were spread over huge areas. You had assemblies, full assemblies, end up into the Pacific Ocean. They actually cemented the local harbor staging area with cement, the floor, the ocean floor, because there was so much radiation coming out of the floor. This story is the epitome of, like, you would assume this is just a fictional book that I'm showing you. You wouldn't, in normal circumstances, you would never consider this to be credible or real, or there's nobody on the planet you would, if you knew about nuclear, and Fukushima say didn't happen, for instance, and you were reading this stuff, you were like, thank God we'll never do something like that. Thank goodness humanity will never be this stupid. But the nuclear industry is so sinister, incredible sinister. Excuse me. Let's bring up the poll for a second, actually. This is a very difficult show, this particular show. Because it's so much details, right? And it doesn't seem real. It's so cruel to manipulate people to go back into a nuclear wasteland. And to grow food there, which they've never stopped doing. I still, after all these years, we cover it typically 5 days a week, I still can't 100% accept that there's anything this evil out there. It's still, in other words, it still shocks me every single day. You wouldn't think it. When you consider what I've covered over the years, you think this is just life for me, right? But I'm still shocked by it. Like when I was out there on research expeditions today, and yesterday, for instance, not seeing any spider webs at all, it doesn't make any sense. It's terrifying, right? Should all nuclear power plants, also known as disease factories, surrounded by farms, which is almost every nuclear plant on the planet, be closed to preserve life? Of course it should be. Wider areas could be recognized if the number of residents hoping to return increases, or if the city of Minnesota, which is 20,000 atoms per kilogram, you can multiply by 66.6 to get a square meter, and the villages of Katsuro and Lydia, home to a total of about 14 households. Massive population used to be there. Eligible for the program, draw up decontamination zone plans. However, the expansions may be limited as most of these areas are mountain forest. So you would have to chop down the trees, put them in a nuclear repository for 1 million years. Every time the wind blows through these trees, you're just liberating. In cities, and even the pollen from these trees is radioactive. Pollen from the plants across the entire country. Wider areas could be recognized as the number of residents hoping to return. In a survey covering residents in the town of Namie, Okuma, Futaba, these are just calling them a nuclear wasteland still doesn't do it justice. Like radiation comes into the equation, everybody's stupid. At the time of the meltdown, 714 households, or 35%, said they intended to return. Now there's 14 or something, right? However, the number who will actually return is estimated to be fewer, as many of the respondents wishing to return were elderly or signaled their intent to return to have their homes decontaminated or dismantled at the government's expenses. Like, you can't decontaminate a home in a nuclear wasteland. Or, for goodness sakes, please don't fall for that. Don't fall for that. Local governments in Fukushima Prefecture have been calling for an evacuation orders to be lifted for the entire difficult to return zone. Local government, like the administrations are usually changed every 4 years. These are not governments, these are monsters. They got none of the attributes of a government. These are actual monsters. Evacuation orders be lifted for the entire nuclear wasteland that they like to gloss over by describing as difficult to return zones. These are not these are you never return zones. You should take all your government that wants you to go back there and make them live there. And then you don't have to worry about them having children and them growing up and destroying your children's life in the future, right? These are actually monsters that are suggesting that. Calling for evacuation orders to be lifted for the... Like, I smell the vomit machine, which is International Atomic Energy Agency's in this story, every single paragraph, right? You have to be pretty evil to write a story like this. Like, this is whoever got their name, the Japanese original, they didn't write this story. This is way too complicated of a story for some Jap to write. You got to be a pro-nuclear degenerate to write this. Very connected. The central government, which, like, to call these people a government is so disproportionate from the facts, has stated that it will seek to lift the orders from the entire regions. Notice that he never give you a name? Local degenerates governments in Fukushima Prefecture are calling for the evacuation orders to be lifted for the entire nuclear wasteland. And the central degenerate government has stated it seeks to lift orders for the entire regions and decided in principle not to decontaminate the mountain forest, because of landslides. The actual attempt to clean up was 3% of the land, and it produced 30 million one-ton bags. They dumped that much again in the rivers and the estuaries, the streams, and in the oceans itself, right? And that's documented. Has decided in principle not to decontaminate the mountain forests because they're worried about landslides. Like, you just want to grab them, like grab their cheeks with vice grips and just hang on and yell at them for about 6 years straight. And as soon as you let them go, they would say, we should decontaminate that place over right there and move people back in right away. They're zombies, right? And they're the most dangerous people conceivable. These pro-idiot nuclear machines are. A reconstruction agency official. So, like, the minute you give these people an official title like that, they turn on everything and everybody immediately. Commented. We like to carry decontamination work and infrastructure development forward to allow all of those wishing to return home to do so as early as possible. That's not a comment. That's a threat. That's a lethal threat against humans we're talking about. The Reconstruction Agency official is actually a mass serial killer, right? He makes Mao and Pol Pot and Hitler look like schoolyard bullies. These are real-life monsters. There is not a single Hollywood story that can touch the evilness that we just witnessed. Let's go back to April the 10th, 2024. I'm trying to build an image in people's brain of what this place really represents. And we're doing it through their own words, through their own stories, recent stories on top of that. And some not so recent, but the majority are very recent stories. For the first time since 2011, it was April 10th, 2024, with the cherry blossoms. The first time they let people... So they removed the restrictions and people went right back into the nuclear wasteland. And brought their kids, too. And so they should be arrested for child abuse immediately. And, if we go back before Fukushima happened, and somebody wrote a book about these facets of what's happening, nobody would believe it. Nobody. They say, "Well, there's too many checks and balances. There's too much opposition. There's too many environmental groups out there that won't tolerate it. Well, the blowback will be hideous." You couldn't be further from the truth. You really couldn't. I couldn't dream this up. Hollywood couldn't dream it up. Hollywood didn't dream it up. This is actually real. That's what makes it even the worst, is that this is real. April the 1st marked the 1-year anniversary of lifting the evacuation order from the specified reconstruction revitalization base areas. And so the specified reconstruction revitalization base areas is where they brought a whole lot of homeless people into to pick up 1-ton bags of topsoil. These are not reconstruction, revitalization in the context of those words. Those words are used to lull good people into complacency, and they're hurting themselves and their friends and their families. And anybody goes in there should immediately shave their heads, throw away all their clothing, because if you bring it home, you're going to contaminate all your other laundry. The festival in a nuclear wasteland. So you got a 25-year-old who was 12 years old when this happened. So it was a really big step to have been able to hold a festival in its original location, and he smiled. Why would you put that there for, and smiled? And the journalists who wrote this should lose their degree immediately. Fukushima locals take a trip, this is 2020, on the first Joe band train. Now, we covered all of this when originally stories came out, right? But it's very important, and it's very pertinent to the current narrative we hear coming out. In nuke disaster hit area, nuke disaster hit. It's a nuclear wasteland, nuclear disaster hit area for 9 years. The train hasn't been there for 9 years. So this is 2020 though, right? Remember the story. And so now that the train is there, look at all the idiots takes their loved ones there, their children, into a nuclear wasteland. And that's what the industry is counting on. That there's enough idiots out there, they can get their pictures, and that'll cause more people to become complacent. And this is how they're doing it: complete deception, and with contempt. What you're seeing is contempt. Locals, train staff, rail fans, and others welcomed the restoration of services March the 14th, which is 3 days after the anniversary, to part of the Fukushima Prefecture train lines. Now, the idea of opening those train stations was it's quicker to bring the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language into the nuclear wastelands, see? And that way they're not driven by millions and millions and millions of 1-ton bags and getting pains of conscience, right? Closed since the nuclear disaster. Yeah, well, nuclear disasters, they never go away. So what are they doing back there? The reopening of the last remaining closed section of the track, which measured 20 kilometers, lies between Tomoka and Namie stations, which are brutal nuclear wastelands, was delayed largely due to high radiation levels. High radiation levels. And the best they can hope to decontaminate, or I shouldn't use the word decontaminate, but to scratch up the topsoil is 3% of the land. In other words, like if you hired someone to paint your house and they only painted 3% of your house and demanded full payment, would you pay them? Of course not, right? If it's hard to imagine there's people this stupid. It's heartbreaking to see so many victims being created by such evil people. Designated as difficult to return. These are you never return. These are not difficult to return. These are nuclear wastelands. They're not going to go back there and live. Why should you? The stations of Yono Mori in the town of Tomoka, Ono in Okuma, Futaba in the town of Futaba are all in the areas which have been evacuation orders lifted on the roads. Right? The evacuation orders were lifted on roads. It's the stupidest statement imaginable. Oh yeah, we lifted evacuation orders in the nuclear wasteland on some roads. Evacuation orders on a road. The roads are to be evacuated. See that. And you wonder why I'm sucking my thumbs when I wake up in the morning. This is not happening. Every day is truly a nightmare for me. Between March the 4th and the 10th, March the 11th, of course, is the anniversary. They'll lift evacuation orders on the road just before the 9th anniversary. Because this is 2020, right? The story. And they use the anniversary as a catalyst to do unconscionable things. Look at a typical serial killer. Will go back if some of them will go back and visit the bodies that they got wherever they got pieces of their clothing or jewelry. On the anniversary they'll go dig that back up and they'll relive that experience. That's what the nuclear industry is doing. Is reliving their shining moment of evil. On March the 10th, the day before the anniversary, 2020, March the 14th, which is 3 days after the 9th anniversary, at around 5:50 a.m., the first local 5-car southbound train left the Namie nuclear wasteland, like the Namie train station, with some 80 passengers aboard, 80 victims aboard is what it should say, obviously. But Namie is not a community anymore. That's 100% nuclear wasteland. I would rather go to Hanford or Los Alamos National Laboratories, which are insidious nuclear wastelands, than go to fucking Namie, excuse the language. From the carriage windows, passengers could see houses damaged in the earthquake still dotting around the landscape. It just gives you the woolies, don't it? Because, look at these beautiful little communities, but they're nuclear wastelands. You can't go there. Just because the idiot machines said you can go there, we're talking about nuclear, for goodness sakes. When you get those atoms, a single one in your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells. Why would you do that to yourself? And why go into a nuclear wasteland where you're going to be breathing in copious amounts of this, and that's going to sequester your muscles, your organs, and your bones forever? There's no species, there's no insects or birds, there's no plants, there's no animals, there's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against anthropogenic man-made radiation. And the nuclear industry, of all people, knows this. You would hope. But do they act like they know this? No. Do they act like they're insane? Yes. They don't act like they're insane. They're actually insane. Among those on the train was a Shin wannabe 45 who worked for the Futaba project. Futaba is joined onto the nuclear meltdowns. It's still melting down. It's been abandoned 13 years at today's stage, but this story is from 2020. So that's 9 years later. And there should never be a project, a firm, which aims to revitalize a nuclear wasteland. So this firm should be charged with crimes against humanity. This is not a firm. He commented in his high school days he commuted on a train every day. Good for you, Nipperhead. And when electronic display on board showed that the next station was Futaba, he took a photo of it with his phone. I'm shocked he could actually use a phone. I'm shocked that somebody that stupid could actually use a phone too. The first train of the day seen pulling out of the nuclear wasteland Futaba station, Joban line, March the 14th. All of this is abandoned. This is a nuclear wasteland. And the only people that's going to go back is the very, very vulnerable, the very, very gullible, and all of these will be coerced by the most despicable people imaginable, which is the nuclear industry. You really should let everybody out of jail and fill it up with everybody in the nuclear industry. Just get rid of these people permanently. They are the worst things can happen to a planet. They have condemned us to a dire future. They destroyed the ecosystem, the biosphere, the fresh water, the oceans. And because there's no one holding them accountable and everybody is acting like they can't do anything when they certainly can. A Futaba station in a nuclear wasteland along, where the multiple reactors are still melting down. The mayor, shithead, handed out dolls, a famed Fukushima Prefecture product, as a commemorative gift to welcome stupid people. Finally, normality is coming back, said the most despicable creature imaginable. Some 20 minutes, and I apologize for using such descriptive language, but what am I supposed to say? It's impossible for me to pretend that they have any kind of redeeming qualities. It's impossible. They simply don't have it. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm not doing you a favor or anybody else a favor by sugarcoating it. Only the most strongest language is tolerable when you're talking about the subject. Anything else is a blatant lie. Some 20 minutes after departing the nuclear wasteland Namie station, the train arrived at another nuclear wasteland station, Tomoka. Here the area around the station had its evacuation orders lifted 3 years ago. So what? It's a nuclear wasteland. You can lift the orders, but that don't mean it's safe. In the driver's compartment at the front of the train was the president of the Eastern Japan Railway, JR East, the railway company. So you got a president of a railway company. Does that mean that now that he's not a nuclear academic, so he should just shut his mouth? I'll be happy to tell him, too, if I ever come across him. It'll be my first words. Actually, you shut your mouth, you piece of... You degenerate mass murdering scumbag. We kept people waiting for 9 years. You didn't keep people waiting for 9 years. It's a nuclear wasteland, moron. From now on, we want as many people as possible to come visit the nuclear wasteland. And so he should be arrested. In a normal society, that person would be arrested immediately and charged with crimes against humanity. The Joban line runs from Tokyo all the way up to northeastern Japan's Miyagi nuclear wasteland. Miyagi is a brutal nuclear wasteland prefecture. In addition to the reopening of the closed sections in Fukushima, limited express service will also resume operation on the line. And local trains will make the round trips to Tomoka and Namie station 11 times a day, because they need a lot of homeless people to pick up one-ton bags. Cherry tunnels offer a respite to the Fukushima returnees. This is 2016. How? does going back to a nuclear meltdown and looking at radioactive trees and pollen offer a respite? It doesn't. And so the people who wrote all of these stories, they tell their friends and families and loved ones and kids that they're journalists, that they're important people, you know? And they're the furthest thing on this planet from an important purpose of people. They're not people. Humans wouldn't do what they're doing, wouldn't manipulate and deceive and coerce and trick people into going into a nuclear wasteland and dressing it up as some kind of respite. Right? And so all these complacent people going back, just grow cherry trees somewhere else where there's no nuclear wasteland. You don't, you like to trick people into going back into seeing cherry trees it's criminal and it's unconscionable too. Cherry blossoms that form a tunnel of flowers, radioactive pollen, were at the peak viewing on April 6. And Tomoka remains evacuated due to the nuclear fallout. And this day marked the beginning of a limited period during which the government allows complacent morons to visit a nuclear wasteland. There is no safe dose. There is no safe exposures. There is no safe limits. There is nothing safe about it. A single atom in your body is going to fuck you up. Your body will attack it for the rest of your life until it builds a tumor around it. Not only that, you're producing all these white blood cells, so you have less oxygen and less nutrition going through your body. In a normal world, these people should be publicly executed as an incentive for the other degenerates not to do the similar. Or because if you let them do it there and you have an accident anywhere else, they're going to do the exact same thing now. Because there's no incentive not to be a piece of shit. Some 1.9 kilometers of the 2.2 kilometers of tree-lined roads is within the high radiation areas. So you can't cross the fucking street. You got to turn around here because that's a nuclear wasteland if you walk across that line. Do you got any idea how bizarre that story actually is? How insane that is to suggest that there's even any remotely chance that it's safe? I can't rationalize that kind of evil, and neither can anybody else. What they're doing is they're doing it because the average person doesn't have an understanding of the incredible harm, danger, and the diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries that can manifest from these exposures. There's heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, and thyroid. The thyroid is saturated. It also means your skeleton is going to be saturated. It also means you're producing radioactive hormones for the rest of your life and radioactive stem cells for the rest of your life. Get any idea how many fucking ways that can go south on you? I'm out in the woods looking for species and I can't find them. I can't even find spiders in the forest where there should be 500,000 per acre. Because you normally check the spider webs, right? You can find it on man-made objects, but you can't find it on the forest, on the trees. Where, a couple of years back I was out on a research expedition, hundreds of miles away from home in the middle of the woods, and I was on a salmon river and I have an underwater drone. And these two guys come down and they were retired teachers. And they were they were curious of what I was up to. And I said, well, I'm researching radioactive fallout. In particular, I'm looking for spiders. And he said, and one of them looks at me and says, I didn't know spiders lived in the woods. And I could just barely, this was a teacher, retired. I could barely wrap my mind around that statement that somebody who was a teacher would say something like that out loud. And they wanted to go poaching, basically, in the river. Fisheries was there that morning and the day before. And they were asking me, did I see anything in the river? Because they knew who I was. They knew I was there researching. They knew I had underwater drones. And they were telling me there was nothing coming up the gates that they had counted. But they were asking, did I see any small fry or any signs of life? And of course, no, I didn't. And here was a retired teacher. And even though I explained that to them, they still wanted to throw their salmon rods, their line out there and try to get a salmon. Despite, these are retired teachers. Imagine how many children they destroyed as teachers. Limited visitation period. There is no, you can't go to a nuclear wasteland and have a limited visitation and come away without being severely harmed by it. Just because it doesn't manifest right away, and just because you can't smell it or see it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or like this is just this headline alone, right? Japan lifts evacuation. This is 2020. This is just a few days before the 9th anniversary. And they do stuff like this in order to try to make people that are now looking at the stories in a few days after that to think, oh, well, starting to recover a little bit. But it's not. They lift evacuation orders over part of a town in Fukushima hit hard by radioactive fallout. Hit hard. And they use that word. You'll hear that connotation a lot if you're into this conversation like I am all the time. A worker, what do you mean a worker? A homeless person removes a no entry sign following the lifting of evacuation orders in Fukushima Prefecture, Futaba. And Futaba is actually joined right on to the nuclear meltdowns that are still melting down. And this kind of this is insanity. And no matter how many times we read these stories, how many years we've been doing it, forever, since Fukushima, I still can't wrap my mind around the world sits in silence. I just can't comprehend it. It drives me insane. Because I care. That makes me a danger, apparently. Because you care, that makes you dangerous to the industry, because you care. The Japanese government lifted an evacuation order in a nuclear wasteland over part of and every time you hear the word difficult to return, you can't return, it's a nuclear wasteland. And really, the people that are doing this, if I was to meet them in person, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good. Because I am not going to be a nice person if I meet any of these people. And they're never going to forget that experience, I can tell you this much. The contempt I have for these people is absolute. And you should too. Every time I heard the word difficult to return zones, the contempt I got for these people is over the top. And I can't even articulate that kind of contempt. In the Fukushima Prefecture town of Futaba, which is unbelievable nuclear wasteland, which was heavily hit by the radioactive fallout, but a disaster at the nuclear power plant it hosts. By framing it this way, heavy hit is massive radioactive fallout is what they're alluding to. It's horrifying that we don't have anybody else out there. It's just unbelievable. It's just inconceivable. It's untenable on top of that. The move, which came to effect at 12 a.m., marks the first time the government has lifted an evacuation order in a nuclear wasteland, where access has been restricted due to heavy radioactive contamination in the wake of a meltdowns. Like, and not giving it the prominence that it deserves by just meltdown. Blah. Without no articulation, no explanation whatsoever. That's what a journalist actually is, right? It's somebody who will sell you out on the drop of a hat and laugh about it. Have cocktail parties and they'll all get together and laugh about how you were stupid enough to go back because they wrote a story. Mandatory evacuation orders will similarly be lifted in the Fukushima Prefecture's town of Akuma and Tomoka, and part of the Joban line has been out of service due to the nuclear disaster, including stations in the three towns will be resumed. But see, they don't explain what a nuclear disaster is. Altogether, 96% of the land in Futaba is designated as a nuclear wasteland. And they got their sugar-coating words, difficult to return zones, but it's a nuclear wasteland. Only 4% of the area is preparing for the lifting of the evacuation areas. And if you go there, you can't cross the street. Like if you're playing baseball in your yard and the ball goes over the fence, you can't go retrieve it because it's a nuclear wasteland. You can't breathe the air because it's a nuclear wasteland. If you go there, by the way, that 4%, you can't stop your car. You have to drive right to the property, and then you have to go in your house. You have to keep your air conditioning off, and there's no way to avoid irradiation. Just cesium-137's pulsing energy 600 feet. So it's pulsing right through your house and out the other side. And people out there actually think that they can escape that they're special, that you can't fucking touch them. A total of 337 square kilometers in 7 Fukushima municipalities, where the yearly radiation exposure dosage tops 50,000 microsieverts, 50 millisieverts, 50,000 microsieverts, has been categorized as a difficult to return zone. These are not difficult to return zones. These are simply nuclear wastelands. Calling them difficult to return is a very dangerous language. And suggesting that there's only 50 millisieverts, which is massive, but to suggest that's all is in these particular communities and it's not a crime is unimaginable to me. Like if you want to meet idiots, you go to the nuclear industry. This is the realm of stupid. The nuclear wasteland area is subjected to the lifting of evacuation orders in the 3 towns this time cover 0.54 square kilometers in total, less than 1% of the total area. Like so 1% of your community. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. Whatever community you're in, say you had to evacuate it. If you can come back, you can only go to 1% of it. You can't go outdoors. You can't stop your car anywhere. You got to run straight in your house when you get there. And because it's the stuff we're talking about is lethal to everything with replicating cells. And then you bioaccumulate it. So if you're there for 24 hours, you're going to bioaccumulate a stupid amount in your lungs, in your bones, in your blood, and in your muscles, your organs, in your skeleton. And it's never going to go away. And your body has to attack it for the rest of your life with white blood cells to try to deal with it. And it's pulsing energy in your body every second. So it's wrecking chromosomes and DNA and cells. Your body tries to repair that every second. And the source, it attacks that too. So you're producing a prolific amount of white blood cells forever. And you can't repair all that damage every second. And you can't contain... And this stuff bioaccumulates in you. You get more and more and more every minute. Because you're in a nuclear wasteland. It's not every day, it's every minute. And there's nobody in this industry that's rational. And since Fukushima, they become completely irrational. They were really bad before this, but now they're insane. And I don't use that word lightly, by the way. And I mean it figuratively too, right? They're actually insane. So coercing people to go back into a nuclear wasteland, into 1% of the land, because it makes the nuclear industry somehow look not as evil as it really is. So it's unconscionably evil to trick people to go back into a nuclear wasteland. After the lifting of evacuation orders, people can freely enter the areas, but due to the lack of infrastructure, they won't be able to live there. Again, you don't go there. It's a nuclear wasteland. Like when you take your children out for a Sunday drive, do you think about going to a nuclear waste site and going for a walk? Has it ever crossed anybody's mind? Of course not, right? But this is what they're suggesting. But it's safe to be at the nuclear meltdown, but it's not safe to be in that 400 square kilometer zone, for instance. Altogether, 96% of the land in the nuclear wasteland, Futaba, is designated as difficult to return, which is the word difficult to return should never exist. You can't return. It's a can't return zone. And the remaining 4% is an area preparing for the lifting of evacuation orders. But there's no one's going to move back. There's a couple of literally stupid. If you gave them an IQ test, you say, well, they're actually stupid. No offense to them, but they're actually stupid. And they're dangerous because they lull other people into complacency and going back into the nuclear wasteland. And then 2019 story, evacuated Fukushima town. It's evacuated because it's a nuclear wasteland. Begins effort to have product restrictions lifted. This is Futaba. Vegetable cultivation trials began, and we covered all this originally, in September in that town, which had been completely evacuated since Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station melted down. And so when you're talking about Chernobyl, you don't just brush over blah, 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 meltdown. It's a very difficult subject. You have to extrapolate a whole lot of information in order to convey the enormity of the issue. Futaba, which is a nuclear wasteland we just talked about multiple times. People are seeing planting product during a cultivation test in Futaba. Like if you stand up and look towards Fukushima, you can see the meltdowns. But just because these people are so stupid they went there and done that. Like if someone jumps over a cliff and you look down and you say, well, he's dead. Are you going to jump next? Are you going to let your loved ones jump next? Are you going to let your friends and your families jump next? The slippery slope is letting these people get away with this. It's the worst thing you can do. And because it's just Dana, it's just me, and a small handful of people, fringe, if you want to call us that, but we have the moral high ground. Right? We're not doing this because it's easy or it's fun or it's trendy or something. We're doing this in desperation so you can have a future, so your loved ones can have a future, so your children can exist without this assault of radiation and the poisoning and the effects of it. Photo provided by the Futaba municipal government. They don't even live there. That government lives probably 50 miles away. The prefectural government has been putting on the trials with cooperation from the town office as well as farmers who are based in the town in northeastern Japan. At a full staff meeting of the town assembly on September the 5th, it was explained that if the crops can't be confirmed to be safe, it's still melting down there. The aim will be to have shipping restrictions removed. On a part of the town's evacuation orders are expected to be lifted next spring. It is thought this doing so will help revive the farming in the area. Why would you want to farm within direct sight of a nuclear meltdown? Why would anybody even suggest that? Because the industry can't exist without being the absolute evilest thing it can be. It wakes up every morning going, they sit around, they have a meeting, and whoever comes up with the most evilest thing of that day, that's what they'll choose to do that day. That's how every day is like that for these people. And you might think that I'm exaggerating a little tiny bit. You are absolutely wrong. And they have enormous influence. You wouldn't believe the things on the internet about me. Like if you didn't actually sit there and listen to me, but you only listened to the stuff that was said about me on the internet, you would think I was the worst creature ever created. And they brag about it, how they got my reputation completely destroyed. You know, like I had gag orders for 3.5 years at a time from the government, Canadian government, to protect some of their assets. And they took those opportunities then to blow that completely out of proportion, and it's never stopped since. And that was after I came in off an ocean expedition that was almost 5 months long without coming home. 5 months on the ocean doing research because it's an extinction event. G7 leaders back Fukushima nuclear plant water release into the ocean. Now, I'm only laughing because it's absurd to suggest that nothing got out of the buildings. Does anybody really think nothing got out of that building? Anybody? Is there anybody out there? You can call in at 709-589-4406. I love to hear somebody so stupid they think nothing got out of that building. I don't mean anything bad by that. I've never talked to anybody that stupid before. I think it would be really enlightening. The safest, deadliest poison in the world. Now, the people who wrote... I'm not going to cover that tonight. We're going to cover that maybe the next show or something. But whoever wrote that story... it might have been this creature right there. But there's a lot of these creatures in that story. These are... And they all got that look, right? Like if I seen that face on the sidewalk walking towards me, I'm crossing the road, right? I don't give a fuck if there's traffic coming by at 80 miles per hour. I'm getting across the street right away. Worker at Fukushima nuclear plant collapses with no vital signs. Radiation exposure denied. A change in the heart's electrical activities causes sudden cardiac arrest. By the way, the Mayo Clinic, right? We've covered the director of the Mayo Clinic probably each year now for at least a decade. And these are the worst monsters conceivable. And they're in charge of cancer victims. They're actually monsters. And the lies they told are blatant lies. Cardiopulmonary arrest, that's what the worker had. Working in the plant's yellow zone. The whole fucking... there's 400 kilometers there, square kilometers, where you can't even go into. But the nuclear meltdown site got a yellow zone. During backfilling work in an area that had been excavated. And so this doesn't make any... We covered this last night extensively if people really want to go down the rabbit hole. We nailed it last night. near the plant's number 2 reactor. And the number 2 reactor and the number 1 reactor and the number 3 reactor and number 4 reactor are 100% meltdowns. And they lost around 8 reactor cores at the top of each building or more, not counting the common spent fuel pool beyond reactor 2, 3, and 4 that was completely pixelated out in pictures that were released in 2021 from a drone near the plant's number 2 reactor. So they put cement, they took the fuel rods and everything else that were ejected from the buildings and the fuel pools, and they put in remote control excavators, bulldozers, and he buried it under large amounts of soil in that. And then they went in, they cemented everything, they put steel plates all over the place, and then they put pavement over that, then they put cement on top of that, and then they put more steel plates and more pavement on top of that. So why would you dig down through all of that? What are they up to? They're looking for the reactor cores that have melted down into the China syndrome. And so and the worker, they call him a worker when these are clearly not going to be educated on this topic whatsoever. Clearly, these are the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language. Clearly, these are not nuclear academics, because if you try to get a nuclear academic to Fukushima, they'll claw the eyes right into your head trying to get away. They'll be screaming, no, at the top of their lungs. They'll literally bite your face off trying to get away from you. There's zero possibility of getting nuclear academics to Fukushima. And then to suggest that he was not exposed to radiation, when how can you not, the whole area, as I just went through for the last hour plus, just hundreds of square kilometers is a nuclear wasteland, but the nuclear site itself is not. Only the nuclear industry could dream up something so insane, can they? A worker from a subsidiary, they have a lot of these. Let me explain some of these people for you, because it's kind of important, right? Let me see if I can get lucky, because Lord knows. Just give me a second. Not looking good on that one. That one might get lucky here. Hang on. And their whole legacy is doing that, by the way, getting the homeless and the destitute. Yeah, I'm not going to find it right now. I don't think. Well, I'll let it populate for a few more seconds. It don't matter. So the sewage is too radioactive to get rid of for the last 13 years. The sediment from the water filtration facilities is too radioactive to get rid of. In Tokyo, 240 kilometers away, for instance, for the last 13 years. And that's not the only places. Every organism in Fukushima Prefecture is incredibly radioactive. The worms, the excrement from the worms was at 1.4 million atoms per kilogram. 60 kilometers away from Fukushima, for instance. But at the nuclear meltdown site itself, everything is safe. A worker from a subsidy, which is the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, was found collapsed at a rest area. But there is no rest areas at a nuclear meltdown site. These are terminologies, all of this we've never heard before. We cover this 5 days a week, week after week, month after month, year after year after year after year after year. And none of these connotations am I familiar with. How come? The man, the homeless guy, the victim of society, the immigrant who don't speak the language, was manipulated going into the plant's yellow zone, which requires protective clothing. There is no protective clothing at a nuclear meltdown. If you had a suit on that was 6 feet thick lead, it still can't protect you at a nuclear meltdown. Because gamma shines, X-rays, neutron bombardments, beta rays, X-rays. And all the stories, and there's no stories in the last 24 hours, no news stories. There's no major medias that covered the story. And it's now officially just faded from sight. And then they say that it would refrain from answering questions regarding the cause of death due to the family wishes. And then also saying it's a low possibility that was caused by work at a nuclear meltdown. Like, if you don't have contempt for this industry, how come? And this is
Canada, we'd have what you would call an atmospheric traffic jam. We have a large high-pressure system over the Atlantic, which is stalling the progression of weather systems across the country. Now, we've had this low-pressure system stalled over Newfoundland for over a week, and you've accumulated upwards of 85 millimeters of rain, where your average for the month is only 95. So this is set to continue as these systems. Canada, we have what you would
start doing research. This stuff has been sitting right on the back of my head. I mean, you got multiple nuclear meltdowns, including Comicomment fuel pool, which is right here. Which is right beyond Reactor 4. And look at all this stuff pixelated out. Because, it's like a banana and a potato chip. And then the poll tonight, why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? And even like the cartoon pictures, they got farmland everywhere. I got some videos for you. Let's play some of this for a bit of fun. Always entertaining, isn't it? This is all from the day, except for some drone shots I'm going to show you. That's what I looked like today and yesterday. Tomorrow will be the same thing. The next day will be on the boat. The boat will be on the trailer. So how many people think nothing got out of these buildings?
So it's Monday the 17th.
That's today.
$80 and counting that. And I put one of them in the bike. One of them was.
And so that one I'm filling up there is for the boat, for the small Zodiac, not the big one.
In the bike?
That was this morning. That's how $80 in fuel this morning.
It's Monday the 17th. We done a show last night on a homeless person dying at Fukushima. We're back on the trail.
Looking for spiders.
We're back on the trail. We're not seeing any spider webs. And so today my focus is mostly on looking in the forest for spider webs. And there's a single strand right there. And that's generally, if you do see something, that's what you're going to see, is these single strands. And if you do see a spider web, it won't be on the trees, it'll be on rocks or on something man-made. But what we're doing is trying to prove me wrong. And so I'll update you as we go along.
My apologies. Look at that this morning. Baby ducks. And now we get a better picture. Look at that surprise, eh? That was fantastic. When I stopped the motor, they scatter. She gives them the alarm. So now, I'm shutting the motor off. Watch them scatter. Now she's going to call him back in a second. So there's 3 of them. There should be a lot more than that, but there's 3 of them. Should be around 6 of them, right? That was pretty awesome, though. That was, and
they got scared when I turned the motor off. The little ones did. And then the mother.
And seagulls. When was the last time you seen seagulls in a pond?
In the last 7-8 years, probably, isn't it?
It's the first time we've seen that in years. And here's the other side of the pond. Look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4.
And it looks like that one's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 babies.
I think there's 6 babies there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2,
6,
4,
maybe 7.
I think I've seen 7.
That's pretty awesome.
That was amazing. That's more babies than we've seen in the last 6 years combined.
Residential or not.
So that was really special today. I couldn't wait to show you guys.
That was fantastic.
That was amazing. I was
absolutely like, fantastic to see.
You wouldn't believe how happy that made me. I know it's not much, but thank goodness. And here's another one. And I backed up, right? That was a pharmacon. And there's a baby. I seen one baby there. They usually got like 8 or 9 or 10 in the group. And she's calling her young one in this. I apologize for the camera work.
Oh, some babies.
I'm leaning backwards trying to get a shot.
Look at that. Some babies there.
There's a baby.
There's at least one baby.
There it is. You'll see the baby walk across. So there could have been more there. I didn't see them. I had to back up. I happened to look up this trail, and that was pretty. That was amazing, though. Like, when was the last time I seen that? We seen 2 different mother ducks with their brews, and we also seen a pharmacon with 1. Typically, they got 7, 8, 9, 10 babies, right? And there could have been more there, and that one got separated because the mother will do that, right? That was really special.
There's probably more there. They usually.
See the water?
So why ain't there any insects? How come there's no insects?
Like, really,
why? The roads have been like this for weeks. These trails been like this for about 3 weeks.
And so there should be.
So you expect to see dragonflies and all kinds of mosquitoes wherever this water is to,
mosquitoes
right?
when I drive through
expect
these
to see them
areas.
Floating in the air like hundreds at a time. But there's none. And there's no spider webs in the forest.
I did find some insects, but I couldn't get a clear shot. I think this might be this
We're
here.
Back to the spot I seen.
I got it in gimbal.
The duck and its brews, 2 of them.
Yeah, that's the end. This is the end of the day, right? I'm headed back here to the truck.
And on the other side, the train track. So I tried to spot some insects.
We did find some insects, so that was cool. Just in that one spot.
See if I can get a boo.
And I tried on the other side too, I think.
There was probably 60 to 100.
Yeah. Well, you can see them, but I was trying to get them to land on my hand and my arm, but they didn't.
Up over this area, probably.
There was some ants.
That means they're going to be crawling up my leg.
And so a lot of the ants nests we're finding are tinder dry. There's no ants in them. And this is right by a pond. So I guess there's extra moisture there. So that was very cool to come across some ants, because the majority of the places last number of years are complete. You can stick your hand right down in the ant's nest. I do it because I know there's no ants there. How many people do you know will stick their arms down in an ant's nest, right? Well, normally you would never get me to do it, but over the last number of years, we discovered that the majority of them are gone. And that the forests it doesn't soak up water anymore. This is why we're seeing the brutal forest fires and flash floods, because we killed a biota in the forest with Fukushima. I guess that don't matter. That was yesterday, but that's basically what it looked like today. I was back to the same spot. And yesterday I went 20 kilometers west. And today, and then 20 kilometers back, it was 19.6 kilometers west and 19.6 kilometers back, right? But today I went east. And so now I got to move 40 more kilometers along and then cover 20 kilometers back and then 20 kilometers back to the vehicle. And then the next trip is 20 kilometers that I end up doing that particular kind of stuff will be 20 kilometers on the other side and then 20 kilometers back. Now I got to move the whole operation another 40 kilometers. And the idea is to cover a huge area this summer. And we're going to repeat it again in the fall, just before the summer's over, and see if we can notice any discrepancies and stuff like that. But we're not seeing any spider webs in the forest. And that literally blows my mind not to see any spider webs in the forest. I didn't think I was going to get a show in the night. And when I finally tried to get the show up and running, we had the yellow screen of death from YouTube. Like, I got fiber optics. It's a guaranteed connection, period. So I had to go and shut everything down, restart everything. Then I had to redo the security codes 2 different times. And I noticed that works to break whatever it is they got done, the IP block they got done to me. You have to shut down the IP and everything. I'll be back out there tomorrow. Because we got the weather, finally. We got the weather, right? And the idea is be on the ocean and in the freshwater ponds too. But I decided Saturday hey, we got to get out into the forest too, right? Because last year was a tough year. 3 heart attacks, kidney stones, and everything else. And 3 heart attacks and 7 stents put in. And so it's a lot of... And I can tell you right now, I am not very healthy, period. I'm just not healthy. I know it. And I'm struggling. It's such a struggle. Like, putting everything together today was such a struggle. I'm covered in bruises. I mean, I'm covered. And today I got a whole bunch of more bruises. So, but the spirit is there. And if the spirit is there, we'll get the work done, won't we? I know probably people don't care, but for posterity's sake, I just want to make sure everybody knows that I'm doing the best I can, and I apologize that I can't do the things I would like to do, but I'm doing the best I can. And so we got enough fuel now to run. Let me read the poll. Should all nuclear power plants, also known as disease factories, that are surrounded by farms, be closed to preserve life? And we got an overwhelming yes vote. Thank you, everybody. So we got enough fuel, because this operation eats fuel. Just eats it, eh? It's ridiculous. Hopefully carry me till at least Thursday. And that's awesome. So we'll be out surveying tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday. Thursday it's supposed to be 90 degrees or something here. Fahrenheit, 30-something degrees Celsius. It's going to be a cooker. And so the idea is to be on the boat Thursday because I got shelter, right? But anyway, I'm thinking about making a shelter for the bike because that was pretty rough today on me. 4 hours and I was you know, I had my shirt sleeves down to my wrist, and then I had the gloves over that, and I had the hat on my head. I had my shirt turned up to protect the back of my neck, and I still got roasted really bad. But to see those two ducks with the little bruise, the little clutch of babies, that was so special. And then to see a ptarmigan with a little baby, that was just for me anyway. That was amazing to see anything, because we've been so disappointed for so long. To finally see anything was wonderful. So don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far. Hugs for everybody. We'll be doing updates again tomorrow night. We'll be covering news tomorrow night. We still got a bunch of stories I didn't cover tonight. And I'm thoroughly burnt out. I got to try to recover between now and the morning. Because it's after midnight now for me. It's 20 after midnight, 12:21 a.m. in the morning. And I got to get up in a few hours and do it all again. I can't wait to get back out there. We got a good day tomorrow, good day Wednesday, good day Thursday. And it's going to cool off after that, but not, well, compared to the scorching. We got like a heat dome over us right now, this building. Yeah, hi everybody. Hugs everybody. Thank you everybody. I wish Stephen Young would show up. I'm just worried sick about him constantly. We'll see everybody on the next show. I'm going to put out some outro music in a second. I'm definitely not on my game tonight. I'm so burnt out. But I'm very thrilled we had some babies in the pictures. That was really special. Okay, we'll see everybody tomorrow night. I don't know, I might be late again tomorrow night. But that's because we're out in the woods a lot, right? But the nuclear industry ain't going to take a day off being evil, so we can't take a day off being good. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody in the next show. Make it this far. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. And we'll see everybody tomorrow night. Take care, folks.